Captain Sarah Chen stood at the observation deck of the research vessel Endeavour, watching the swirling crimson storms of Xerion 7 through reinforced titanium glass. The planet below looked like a bleeding wound against the black void of space, its surface scarred by lightning that could vaporize starships and winds that moved faster than sound itself. Preliminary scans are complete, Captain, reported Dr. Marcus Webb, the expedition's lead xenobiologist. His voice carried that familiar mix of excitement and terror that came with studying Deathworlds. The Galactic Council wasn't exaggerating. This place makes Kepler 442b look like a vacation resort. Sarah nodded grimly. Kepler 442b was classified as a Class 5 Deathworld, barely habitable even with full environmental suits. The fact that Xerion 7 had earned the unprecedented rating of Class 0 meant it was theoretically impossible for any known form of life to survive on its surface for more than a few minutes. Radiation levels? She asked, though she already dreaded the answer. 12 times lethal dose for most known species, Webb replied, consulting his tablet. The magnetic field is so chaotic it's basically non-existent. Solar radiation hits the surface directly, and that's before we factor in the ambient radioactivity from the uranium-rich soil. Lieutenant Commander James Rodriguez, the ship's tactical officer, joined them at the viewport. His weathered face bore the scars of previous Deathworld expeditions. Temperature readings are even worse. Surface temperature varies between -180 Celsius during the night cycle and +340 during peak solar exposure. The atmospheric pressure would crush most beings before they could take their first breath. Sarah absorbed this information while studying the planet's chaotic weather patterns. The Galactic Council had sent them here as part of humanity's ongoing evaluation process. 3 years ago, Earth had been granted provisional membership in the galactic community, but full membership required proving that humans could contribute meaningfully to interstellar civilization. Most species earned this through advanced technology, diplomatic skills, or artistic achievement. Humans, it seemed, were being tested differently. The Council's request still doesn't make sense to me, admitted Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's geologist. They want us to establish a research outpost on a world where nothing can survive. It's like asking someone to build a house on the surface of a star. Unless that's exactly the point, Sarah mused. Over the past 3 years, she'd learned that humanity's reputation in the galaxy was unique. While other species had achieved spaceflight through centuries of careful advancement, humans had practically exploded into space in a matter of decades. Their homeworld, originally classified as a moderate death world, had been reclassified as surprisingly hospitable after galactic observers studied human biology and behavior. The intercom crackled to life. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council, announced Communications Officer Yuki Tanaka. Put it through to the main screen, Sarah ordered. The viewport transformed into a communication display, revealing the imposing figure of Counselor Zephix, a crystalline being from the Andromedan Collective. Their species had evolved on a low-gravity world with stable weather patterns and had never encountered conditions remotely resembling what lay below. Captain Chen, Zephix's translated voice resonated through the bridge. I trust your initial survey has confirmed our assessment of Xerion 7's hostile nature. That's an understatement, Counselor. This world appears designed to kill anything that approaches it. Precisely why we selected it for your species' final evaluation. Zephix's crystalline features seemed to shimmer with what might have been amusement. The Galactic Council has debated humanity's application for full membership extensively. Your species present complications. Rodriguez stepped forward. What kind of complications? You survive where others cannot, Zephix explained. Your homeworld hosts predators that would terrify most galactic citizens. You consume liquids that would poison other species for recreation. You engage in activities for entertainment that would qualify as torture for most beings. The Council needs to understand the extent of human adaptability. Sarah felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with exasperation. Humanity's resilience had become both a blessing and a curse in galactic society. While it opened doors others couldn't access, it also made many species deeply uncomfortable. What exactly are you asking us to do? She inquired. Establish a permanent research station on Xerion 7's surface, Zephix replied matter-of-factly. Conduct meaningful scientific research for a minimum of 1 standard galactic year. Prove that humans cannot merely survive in impossible conditions, but thrive and contribute valuable knowledge. Webb nearly choked on his coffee. Counselor, with respect, our environmental suits are rated for Class 7 Deathworlds at most. Zarian 7 would destroy them in minutes. Then you must adapt, Zephix responded. Other species have contributed to galactic knowledge through technological innovation, artistic expression, or diplomatic excellence. Humans seem uniquely suited for, let us call it, extreme environmental research. If you succeed, humanity will gain full council membership and access to advanced technologies currently restricted to established civilizations. And if we fail? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Failure would suggest that even humans have limits. In that case, humanity would remain at provisional status indefinitely, with access only to basic galactic technologies and trade agreements. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew in stunned silence. Outside the viewport, Zarion 7 continued its violent rotation, storms the size of continents wreaking havoc across its surface. Well, Rodriguez said finally, they certainly don't ask for much. Sarah turned to her senior staff. These were the best of the best. Scientists, engineers, and explorers who had volunteered for humanity's most dangerous missions. Each had survived expeditions to worlds that had claimed the lives of countless explorers from other species. Recommendations? She asked. It's impossible, Webb stated flatly. No known materials can withstand that combination of radiation, pressure, and temperature extremes. Known materials, Vasquez repeated thoughtfully. But human engineering has always specialized in making the impossible merely improbable. Tanaka looked up from her communications console. Captain, I'm receiving requests for volunteer updates from Earth. Word of our mission has apparently leaked to the general population. Sarah wasn't surprised. Humanity had always been drawn to impossible challenges like moths to flame. The difference was that humans had developed an annoying habit of surviving the encounter and coming back for more. How many volunteers? She asked. Current count is approaching 50,000, Tanaka replied. And that's just in the first hour since the news broke. Rodriguez chuckled grimly. Sounds about right. Tell Earth we'll need engineers, materials specialists, and anyone crazy enough to think they can build a base on Hell itself. Sarah looked back at Zarion 7, its violent surface promising death to anything foolish enough to approach. The Galactic Council thought they were setting an impossible task. They clearly didn't understand humans very well. Prep the landing shuttles, she ordered. Let's go see what this Deathworld has to offer. The descent to Zarion 7's surface was like riding lightning through a hurricane while being shot at by angry gods. Captain Chen gripped her harness as the modified landing shuttle Resilience bucked and shuddered through atmospheric entry, its experimental shielding screaming under the assault of radiation and debris. Hull temperature approaching critical limits, reported Chief Engineer Maya Patel over the comm system. Her voice remained steady despite the shuttle threatening to shake itself apart, but the new ceramic titanium composite is holding better than projected. Through the reinforced porthole, Sarah watched the alien landscape rush up to meet them. Zarion 7's surface looked like a battlefield between gods. Massive crater chains stretched across continents. Geysers of superheated gas erupted randomly, and rivers of molten metal carved glowing scars through black stone plains. Landing site identified, announced pilot Rebecca Torres. That plateau looks relatively stable. And by stable, I mean it's only shifting by a few meters every minute instead of collapsing entirely. Dr. Webb, strapped into the seat across from Sarah, looked pale green despite his environmental suit's life support systems. Remind me again why we volunteered for this? Because 67 other species said it couldn't be done, Rodriguez replied from his position near the shuttle's weapon systems. Not that weapons would help much against a planet trying to kill them, but old habits died hard. The landing was controlled chaos. Torres executed a textbook emergency touchdown on what appeared to be stable ground, only to discover that stable was a relative term on Zarion 7. The plateau they'd chosen was actually a massive chunk of crystallized volcanic glass, floating on a sea of semi-liquid rock. Well, that's encouraging, Webb muttered as the shuttle's support sank several inches into the unstable surface. We've been here 30 seconds and already the ground is trying to eat us. Patel's fingers flew over her diagnostic equipment. Environmental readings are impressive. External temperature is currently 127 Celsius. Radiation levels would cook most known life forms in under 4 minutes. and the atmospheric pressure is roughly equivalent to being 3 kilometers underwater. Good thing we're not most known life forms, Sarah said, checking her suit systems one final time. The prototype environmental suits they wore represented the bleeding edge of human engineering. 3 layers of adaptive armor, miniaturized life support systems that could recycle almost anything into breathable air, and emergency protocols that would make a military medic proud. Surface team, prepare for EVA, she announced. Remember, our suits are rated for 6 hours maximum exposure. We need to complete initial survey and site preparation in 4 hours to maintain safety margins. The airlock cycled, and Sarah stepped onto the surface of the most hostile world any human had ever attempted to explore. Immediately, her suit systems began screaming warnings. Radiation alarms, temperature alerts, atmospheric warnings, a symphony of danger that would have sent any sane person running back to orbit. Instead, Sarah felt the familiar thrill of standing where no one had stood before. Humans, she reflected, might not be entirely sane by galactic standards. Surface gravity is approximately 1.3 Earth standard, reported Vasquez, who was busy taking geological samples despite the ground occasionally glowing red-hot beneath her feet. Interesting mineral composition. The surface appears to be primarily crystallized uranium compounds mixed with metallic hydrogen deposits. That explains the radiation, Webb observed, scanning the horizon with his instruments. Wait, that's impossible. What's impossible? Sarah asked, following his gaze toward a distant ridgeline. I'm detecting organized structures approximately 2 kilometers northwest, geometric patterns that don't match natural formation processes. Rodriguez immediately raised his plasma rifle, training it toward the indicated direction. Hostile structures? Not necessarily hostile, Webb replied, but definitely artificial. Something built those formations, and according to every survey and galactic databases, nothing can survive here long enough to build anything. Sarah made the decision that would define their mission. We investigate. Torres, bring the shuttle online for emergency pickup. Everyone else were taking a walking tour of impossible architecture. The journey across Zerion 7's surface was like trekking through an active war zone. Geysers of superheated plasma erupted randomly from fissures in the ground. Hurricane-force winds carrying clouds of radioactive dust tried to scour them from the landscape, and the very air seemed to burn with violent energy. Yet somehow the human team pressed forward. When falling rocks blocked their path, they found ways around or through. When radioactive storms forced them to take shelter, they used the time to collect additional samples. When the ground beneath them literally caught fire, they kept walking until they found cooler terrain. You know, Rodriguez commented as they climbed over a ridge of melted stone, I'm starting to think the Galactic Council doesn't understand what humans consider recreational activities. The structures Webb had detected turned out to be even more mysterious than anticipated. Rising from a crater floor that glowed with its own heat were geometric formations that defied easy description. They resembled a combination of crystal formations and metallic scaffolding, but constructed on a massive scale and with a precision that suggested advanced engineering. These are definitely artificial, Vasquez confirmed, running her scanners over the nearest formation. But the construction materials are unlike anything in galactic databases. It's as if someone took the most hostile elements of this environment and somehow fashioned them into architectural structures. Webb was practically vibrating with excitement, his scientific curiosity overcoming any concerns about safety. The radiation readings from these structures are off the charts, but they're not random. There's a pattern, almost like the structures are channeling and focusing the ambient energy. Channeling it for what purpose? Sarah asked. Before anyone could answer, the structures began to change. The geometric patterns started shifting, rearranging themselves with fluid grace despite appearing to be made of solid matter. A low harmonic vibration filled the air, felt more than heard through their environmental suits. Captain, Torres's voice crackled through their comm system from the shuttle. I'm detecting massive energy buildups across the entire planet's surface. Whatever those things are, they're activating. Sarah made another command decision. Fall back to the shuttle. We've got enough data for initial analysis. But as they turned to leave, the structures completed their transformation. What had appeared to be abstract formations now clearly resembled technological installations. Energy collectors, processing facilities, and what looked disturbingly like habitat modules designed for beings that thrived in conditions that would instantly kill most galactic life forms. "Captain," Webb said quietly, his voice filled with awe and concern. "I don't think we're the first species to consider Zarian 7 habitable. I think someone else got here first. The retreat to their shuttle was accomplished under entirely new circumstances. They were no longer exploring an empty Deathworld. They were potentially trespassing on someone's territory. Someone who had not only survived on Zarian 7, but had apparently made it home." As they lifted off from the increasingly unstable plateau, Sarah watched the mysterious structures through the shuttle's rear viewport. The installations were fully active now, drawing energy from the planet's violent environment and converting it into organized patterns of light and force. "New mission parameters," she announced to her team. "We're not just here to prove humans can survive a Class 0 Deathworld. We're here to make contact with whoever built those structures." Rodriguez checked his weapon systems with grim satisfaction. "Think they'll be friendly? On a world like this?" Sarah replied, watching Zarian 7 shrink behind them as they returned to orbit. "If they survived here long enough to build permanent installations, they're probably tougher than anything the galaxy has seen before." "Good," Webb said, already planning their next descent. "Maybe we can finally meet someone who won't think humans are completely insane for volunteering to come here." Sarah smiled grimly as the Endeavor came into view. The Galactic Council had wanted to test human limitations. Instead, they discovered that even on the most hostile world known to galactic civilization, humans weren't alone in their apparent madness. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been awake for 36 hours straight, analyzing mineral samples and energy readings from the mysterious structures on Zarian 7's surface. Her findings were so extraordinary that she'd run the tests 4 times before accepting the results. "Captain, you need to see this," she called from the geology lab aboard the Endeavor. Her voice carried the exhaustion of prolonged research mixed with the excitement of groundbreaking discovery. Sarah arrived to find Vasquez surrounded by holographic displays showing molecular structures that seemed to shift and dance with their own inner light. The samples they'd collected were unlike anything in human or galactic databases. "These materials shouldn't exist," Vasquez explained, highlighting specific compounds on her displays. "The base structure appears to be crystallized uranium-238, but it's been somehow fused with metallic hydrogen and trace elements that can only be created in stellar cores. The energy binding these compounds together is holding steady at temperatures that should cause molecular breakdown. Meaning whoever built those structures has mastered material science at a level that makes our most advanced engineering look like children playing with blocks. They've created construction materials that actually grow stronger under the conditions that exist on Zarian 7. Sarah studied the holographic models. Each sample seemed to pulse with contained energy, as if the very atoms were barely restrained from releasing forces that could level mountains. "Any theories on how they achieved this?" "Several, none of them comforting," Vasquez replied. "The simplest explanation is that these beings evolved naturally in environments similar to Zarian 7. They didn't adapt to survive here, they adapted here to survive everywhere else." Before Sarah could respond, the ship's general alarm began sounding. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in red as crew members rushed to battle stations. "Captain, to the bridge," announced Lieutenant Tanaka over the intercom. "We're receiving a transmission. Origin point is those structures on the planet's surface." Sarah sprinted through the corridors, her mind racing through first contact protocols that had never been designed for situations like this. The Galactic Council's standard procedures assumed contact with species that had evolved under roughly similar environmental conditions. No one had developed guidelines for communicating with beings that considered Class 0 Deathworlds habitable. The bridge was a controlled chaos of activity when she arrived. Technical officers hunched over communication equipment, trying to decode transmission patterns unlike anything in their databases. "Report," Sarah demanded. "The transmission began approximately 3 minutes ago," Tanaka explained, her fingers dancing over complex decryption algorithms. "It's not using any known galactic communication protocols, but the mathematical structure suggests deliberate intelligence. Can we decode it?" "We're trying." "The signal structure is incredibly complex. It's not just audio or visual data. They're transmitting on electromagnetic spectrums we've never seen used for communication, including several frequencies that should be impossible to generate without industrial-scale fusion reactors." Dr. Webb joined them, carrying a tablet displaying xenobiological analysis charts. Captain, I've been studying the energy patterns from those surface structures. Whoever built them processes energy at scales that dwarf our most optimistic projections for human civilization development over the next 1,000 years. Rodriguez, manning the tactical station, looked up from his displays. Should I be concerned that our new neighbors apparently have access to stellar-level energy sources? Unknown, Sarah replied, watching the communication displays struggle to process the incoming transmission. But I'm more interested in why they're trying to talk to us now. They've been down there long enough to build permanent installations, but they waited until we showed up to make contact. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Chief Engineer Patel, working from the engineering deck, managed to isolate specific frequency bands that corresponded to mathematical constants. Captain, I think I've found their Rosetta Stone, Patel announced over the intercom. They're transmitting mathematical proofs, basic arithmetic, geometric relationships, physical constants. It's like they're establishing a baseline for communication with a species they know nothing about. Patch it through to the main display, Sarah ordered. The bridge's main screen transformed into a cascade of mathematical equations, each more complex than the last. The progression was elegant, beginning with basic addition and multiplication, advancing through geometric theorems, and culminating in physics equations that described the fundamental forces of the universe. They're assuming we can understand advanced mathematics, Webb observed. That suggests they consider us potentially intelligent, despite coming from what they probably see as an impossibly benign environment. Sir, Tanaka interrupted, the transmission is shifting. They're moving beyond mathematical constants into what appears to be environmental data. The equations changed, now describing temperature ranges, radiation levels, atmospheric pressures, and gravitational constants. The values being transmitted exactly matched the conditions on Zerion 7's surface. They're describing their world, Sarah realized. But why? The answer came moments later. The environmental data began changing, showing progressively less extreme conditions. Temperature ranges dropped from hundreds of degrees to more moderate levels. Radiation readings decreased, atmospheric pressure stabilized. They're showing us a progression, Vasquez said, having arrived on the bridge during the transmission. From their natural environment to something approaching galactic standard habitable conditions. An invitation? Rodriguez suggested. Are they offering to modify their environment to make it easier for us to visit? Before anyone could respond, the transmission changed again. New mathematical structures appeared, but these were different, more complex, more nuanced. They described biological systems, genetic structures, and adaptation mechanisms that surpassed anything in human understanding of evolution. Captain, Webb said quietly, I think they're describing themselves, and if I'm reading this correctly, they're showing us how they modify their own biology to survive in different environmental conditions. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's climate control. They're shapeshifters? Adaptive beings that can modify their physiology at will? More than that, Webb continued, his excitement building despite the implications. They're showing us adaptation processes that could allow biological entities to survive in any environment. Vacuum, stellar cores, planetary atmospheres, liquid methane oceans, they've developed biological adaptation that transcends environmental limitations. Which means, Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect the answer. Which means they're probably wondering why we're still locked into our basic human physiology when we're voluntarily visiting Deathworlds, Vasquez concluded. To them, we must appear to be primitives who refuse to use the most basic survival tools. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving the bridge crew in contemplative silence. Outside the viewports, Zerion 7 continued its violent rotation, but now its hostility seemed less absolute. Someone had not only survived its worst conditions, but had built a civilization that thrived there. Recommendations? Sarah asked her senior staff. We need to respond, Webb said immediately. They've established communication protocols and demonstrated peaceful intentions. This could be the most significant first contact event in galactic history, with beings who have mastered biological adaptation beyond our current understanding, Rodriguez added. They could potentially teach us to survive in any environment without technological assistance. Sarah considered the implications. The Galactic Council had sent them to prove human resilience in impossible conditions. Instead, they'd discovered a species that had redefined what impossible meant. Prepare a response transmission, she decided. Mathematical introduction, followed by human biological and technological data. Let's show them how we survive hostile environments. What if they're not impressed by our approach? Tanaka asked. Sarah smiled grimly. Then maybe they'll teach us better methods. Either way, we're about to find out if humans are the only species insane enough to call Class Zero. Deathworld's home, as the crew began preparing humanity's first message to beings who had transcended environmental limitations, Sarah couldn't help wondering if the Galactic Council would classify this as success or failure. Humans had been sent to prove they could survive anything. Instead, they'd found someone who'd already perfected the art. The human response took 18 hours to prepare. Dr. Webb insisted on including detailed biological data about human adaptation mechanisms, while Engineer Patel wanted to showcase human technological solutions to environmental challenges. The result was a comprehensive data package that represented the best of human scientific understanding. Transmission ready, announced Tanaka from her communications station. We're broadcasting on the same frequency patterns they used, with mathematical introduction sequences followed by detailed information about human physiology, technology, and environmental adaptation methods. Captain Chen authorized the transmission and waited. According to their calculations, the signal would reach Zarian 7's surface in approximately 4 minutes. Response time would depend entirely on how quickly the mysterious beings could process information about a species they'd never encountered. The answer came faster than anyone expected. Incoming transmission. Tanaka reported just 6 minutes after their broadcast ended. Signal strength is significantly higher than their previous communication. They've apparently decided we're worth a more detailed response. The bridge crew gathered around the main display as the alien message began decoding. What appeared first surprised everyone. Human mathematical proofs, but enhanced and extended beyond their original formulations. They're not just acknowledging our mathematics, Webb observed. Studying the complex equations flooding the screen, they're showing us improved versions. Look at this. They've taken our fusion energy calculations and demonstrated methods for achieving stable fusion at room temperature. That's impossible, Patel protested, then immediately began studying the enhanced equations. Actually, wait. If you modify the containment field structure this way and adjust the plasma density calculations, dear God, they're right. This should work. The mathematical lessons continued for several minutes, covering human technological concepts but demonstrating improvements that represented centuries of advancement. Fusion power, space propulsion, materials science, computer processing. Every field of human knowledge was being gently corrected and enhanced. It's like having a university professor review our homework, Rodriguez observed. Except the professor happens to be a civilization that's mastered physics we didn't know existed. Then the transmission shifted focus. Biological data began flowing across their screens, but unlike the mathematical corrections, this information was entirely new. Cellular structures that could reorganize themselves in real time. Genetic modification processes that operated faster than human technology could measure. Adaptation mechanisms that allowed life to thrive in any environment imaginable. Captain, Webb said, his voice filled with awe and concern. They're not just showing us advanced biology. They're demonstrating biological engineering that could transform human beings into something entirely different. Sarah studied the biological schematics. The creatures they were communicating with had apparently abandoned fixed physical forms in favor of adaptive biology that responded instantly to environmental changes. They could survive in vacuum by modifying their cellular structure, withstand radiation by altering their genetic code in real time, and adapt to any atmospheric composition by reshaping their metabolism. Are they offering to transform us? She asked. I think so, Webb replied. But look at this section. They're also showing us how to develop these capabilities gradually over multiple generations. It's like they're offering us an evolutionary shortcut. Before Sarah could respond, the transmission changed again. This time, visual data accompanied the biological information. Images of beings that shifted and flowed like living liquid, taking different forms as environmental conditions changed. Sometimes humanoid, sometimes crystalline, sometimes resembling pure energy contained within flexible matter. That's what they look like? Tanaka asked, staring at the shape-shifting forms on the display. I don't think look like is the right term, Webb corrected. I think those are just some of the forms they can assume. Their biology appears to be completely fluid. The final section of the transmission was the most remarkable. The aliens began showing environmental modification techniques that went far beyond anything in human understanding. They demonstrated methods for altering planetary atmospheres, adjusting gravitational fields, and even modifying stellar output to create custom environments. They're not just adapted to survive on Deathworlds, Vasquez realized. They create Deathworlds. Zarian 7 isn't naturally this hostile. They've modified it to serve as some kind of testing or development environment. The implications were staggering. Humanity had traveled to Zarian 7 to prove they could survive in impossible conditions, only to discover that a civilization existed that created impossible conditions as standard practice. Captain, Patel called from her engineering station. I'm detecting energy buildups on the planet's surface. The structures we observed are becoming much more active. Through the viewports, they could see changes occurring on Zarian 7's surface. The violent storms were becoming more organized. The chaotic electrical discharges were forming geometric patterns, and the radiation levels were shifting into controlled bands. They're demonstrating environmental control in real time, Sarah observed, showing us how they modified this world. The transmission concluded with a simple mathematical sequence that required no translation. Coordinates and timing data for a specific location on Zarian 7's surface, along with environmental conditions that would be maintained for a limited period. They're inviting us down for a face-to-face meeting, Webb concluded, and they're offering to modify local conditions to make it survivable for us. Rodriguez checked his tactical displays. The energy levels required to modify planetary conditions in real time are beyond measurement. If they wanted to hurt us, they could have vaporized our entire ship without effort. Sarah considered their options. The Galactic Council had sent them to establish a research station on an impossible world. Instead, they'd made contact with beings who had transcended the concept of impossible worlds entirely. Prepare the landing shuttle, she decided. Full diplomatic protocols, but maintain readiness for immediate evacuation. We're going to meet the neighbors. Captain, Webb said quietly. What do we tell the Galactic Council about this? Sarah smiled grimly. We tell them that humans aren't the only species who think Class 0 Deathworlds are interesting vacation destinations. But unlike us, these beings actually know what they're doing. As the crew prepared for humanity's first face-to-face contact with true Deathworld dwellers, Sarah couldn't help wondering if the meeting would result in humanity learning to transcend environmental limitations, or if it would prove that even human stubbornness had its limits. One more thing, she announced to her crew. If these beings offer to improve our biology to better survive extreme environments, we politely decline until we understand exactly what they mean by improvement. Understood, Captain, Webb replied. Though I admit, part of me is curious about what humans might become with that level of biological control. That's exactly why we're being careful, Sarah responded. Some evolutionary shortcuts might be more dramatic than we're prepared for. The shuttle bay opened, and humanity prepared to meet beings who had redefined the relationship between life and hostile environments. The Galactic Council had wanted to test human limits. Instead, they were about to discover that some species had evolved beyond the concept of limits entirely. The descent to the modified landing zone on Zarian 7 was unlike anything the human crew had experienced. Where their previous landing had been a battle against a planet trying to destroy them, this approach felt almost gentle. The violent atmospheric storms had been organized into ordered patterns. The crushing gravitational fields had been stabilized, and the lethal radiation had been channeled into controlled streams that avoided their descent path. It's like flying through a carefully managed industrial facility, instead of a natural disaster, reported Pilot Torres as she guided the shuttle through the modified atmospheric conditions. They've turned an entire planet into a precision instrument. Captain Chen monitored their descent while studying real-time environmental readings. The landing zone showed breathable atmospheric pressure, manageable radiation levels, and temperatures that wouldn't instantly cook anything organic. Yet sensors clearly indicated that these conditions existed in a bubble less than 5 kilometers in diameter, surrounded by Zarian 7's normal lethal environment. Local environmental modification complete, announced Dr. Vasquez from her geological station. They've created a pocket of Class 8 habitable conditions in the middle of a Class 0 Deathworld. The energy control required for this is theoretically impossible with any known technology. The shuttle touched down on a landing pad that definitely hadn't existed during their first visit. The surface was composed of the same adaptive materials they'd observed earlier, but arranged in geometric patterns that clearly indicated artificial construction. More disturbing was the fact that the landing pad appeared to have grown from the surrounding terrain rather than being built upon it. "Surface team, prepare for EVA," Sarah announced. Though their environmental suits seemed almost redundant given the modified conditions outside. "Full diplomatic protocols, but remember, we're dealing with beings who've demonstrated they can modify reality at a planetary scale." The airlock cycled, and Sarah stepped onto the surface of a world that had been transformed to accommodate human visitors. The air was breathable, the temperature was comfortable, and the gravity felt normal despite being artificially regulated. Yet everything around them pulsed with barely contained energy that spoke of forces beyond human comprehension. "Welcome." The voice came from everywhere at once, transmitted through vibrations in the ground, fluctuations in the air pressure, and subtle electromagnetic fields that their suits detected as organized sound. It was communication through environmental manipulation, rather than traditional vocalization. "We acknowledge your presence," Sarah replied, activating her suit's external speakers. "I am Captain Sarah Chen, representing the human species and the Earth Colonial Authority. We are pleased to meet beings who choose challenge over comfort," the environmental voice responded. "Your species demonstrates interesting characteristics. You survive hostile conditions through external tools rather than biological adaptation. Yet you voluntarily seek environments that test these tools beyond their design parameters." Dr. Webb stepped forward, his xenobiological scanners active but detecting no traditional life signs. "May we ask what you call yourselves? And what form you currently inhabit?" The response came with a demonstration. The ground in front of them began to shift and flow, rising into a humanoid shape composed of the same adaptive matter they'd observed in the planetary structures. The figure was roughly human-sized but seemed to be made of living metal that pulsed with internal energy. "We are what you might translate as those who adapt," the being explained, its form stabilizing into a shape that roughly resembled human proportions. "We do not inhabit forms. We become forms as necessity requires." Lieutenant Rodriguez maintained his position near the shuttle, monitoring for threats while trying to comprehend beings who could reshape matter at will. "How long have you been on Zarian 7? "Time is relative to biological limitations," the adapter replied. "We arrived when this star system was young. We have modified this world many times to serve different purposes. Currently, it serves as a testing environment for extreme adaptation scenarios." "Testing environment?" Sarah asked, beginning to understand the implications. "Correct. We create conditions that challenge biological adaptation to its limits, then develop solutions. Zarian 7 represents one of our more successful environmental modification projects. We have developed 17 different life forms capable of thriving under these conditions." Dr. Webb's instruments were detecting energy patterns unlike anything in human databases. "Are you offering to help us adapt to survive here?" "We observed your previous visit with interest," the adapter continued. "Your species employs technological solutions to environmental challenges, rather than biological ones. This approach is unusual in our experience. Most species that develop space travel have first mastered biological self-modification." Chief Engineer Patel, monitoring from the shuttle, spoke through the comm system. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy flows beneath the surface. Whatever they're using for power generation makes our fusion reactors look like candles. We noticed your technological limitations," the adapter said, apparently having monitored their communications. "Your power generation methods are primitive, but your willingness to face extreme environments without proper biological preparation shows remarkable determination." "Or remarkable stupidity," Rodriguez muttered, though his comment was caught by the environmental communication system. The distinction between determination and stupidity is often unclear until after the outcome is determined, the adapter replied, with what might have been amusement. "We find your approach fascinating precisely because it defies practical logic." Sarah decided to address the core question directly. "The Galactic Council sent us here to establish a research station. They believed this world was uninhabitable. Were they wrong? The Galactic Council understands survival in terms of avoiding environmental challenges, the adapter explained. We understand survival in terms of transcending environmental limitations. This world is perfectly habitable for beings with proper adaptation capabilities. And you're willing to share those capabilities? The adapter's form shifted, becoming more complex and displaying what appeared to be holographic projections of genetic structures and cellular modifications. We can offer biological enhancement that would allow your species to survive in any environment. Complete adaptation capability, real-time biological modification, transcendence of physical limitations. Dr. Webb studied the projections with growing excitement and concern. The modifications you're showing would fundamentally alter human biology. We'd become something entirely different. Improvement often requires change, the adapter acknowledged. Your current biological limitations restrict you to a narrow range of environmental conditions. Why accept such restrictions when they can be overcome? Because those limitations are part of what makes us human, Sarah replied carefully. We've learned to work within our biological constraints while using technology to expand our capabilities. Interesting philosophy. You prefer technological enhancement over biological enhancement. This explains your approach to environmental challenges. Engineer Patel's voice crackled through their comm system, with barely contained excitement. Captain, they're showing me power generation techniques that could revolutionize human civilization. Zero-point energy extraction, controlled fusion at room temperature, gravitational field manipulation. They're offering to share technological advancement instead of biological modification. Is that possible? Sarah asked the adapter. Technology transfer instead of biological enhancement? Your species has demonstrated commitment to technological solutions. We can provide technological advancement that serves the same purpose as biological adaptation. The choice between approaches is yours to make. Sarah realized they were at a crossroads that would define humanity's future development. Accept biological enhancement and transcend environmental limitations through transformation. Or accept technological advancement and transcend limitations while remaining fundamentally human. We need time to consider these options, she said. Diplomatically, time is abundant, the adapter replied. We have modified this environment to remain stable for your consideration period. When you decide, we will provide assistance based on your chosen path of development. As the human team prepared to return to their shuttle, Sarah couldn't help wondering if the Galactic Council would consider either option a successful completion of their mission. Humans had been sent to prove they could survive impossible conditions. Instead, they'd found beings offering to make impossible conditions obsolete. Captain, Webb said quietly as they boarded the shuttle. Whatever we decide, this changes everything. We're not just choosing survival methods. We're choosing what human civilization becomes. Sarah nodded, watching Zarian 7's modified landscape through the shuttle's viewports. The Galactic Council had tested human limitations. Instead, they discovered possibilities that transcended limitations entirely. The emergency session aboard the Endeavour lasted 14 hours. Captain Chen had assembled not just her senior staff, but department heads from across the ship, along with real-time consultation links to Earth's colonial authority and the Galactic Council. The choice facing humanity would affect the entire species' future development. Let me make sure I understand the options correctly, said Dr. Margaret Foster, Earth's Colonial Authority Director, her image flickering slightly on the communication display. These adapters are offering either complete biological enhancement that would allow humans to survive in any environment, or technological advancement that would achieve the same results while preserving human biology. Correct, Dr. Webb confirmed from his position at the conference table. But the implications of each choice are staggering. The biological enhancement would fundamentally transform what humans are. We'd become shapeshifters capable of surviving stellar cores or deep space vacuum. The technological option would provide tools that make environmental challenges irrelevant. Chief Engineer Patel had been analyzing the technological data provided by the adapters for hours. The technology they're offering is beyond our current understanding by several orders of magnitude. Zero-point energy sources would provide unlimited power. Gravitational field manipulation would revolutionize space travel. Environmental control systems could terraform planets in years instead of centuries. And the biological option? asked Counselor Zephyx, whose crystalline form dominated another section of the display. The Galactic Council was monitoring these discussions with intense interest. Complete biological adaptation capability, Dr. Webb explained. Real-time genetic modification, cellular restructuring at will, survival capabilities that transcend any environmental limitation. Humans could live on gas giants inside stellar coronas, or in the vacuum between galaxies, but we'd no longer be human in any meaningful biological sense, added Dr. Vasquez. Our entire species would become something else entirely. Sarah studied the faces around the conference table. These were humanity's best and brightest, people who had dedicated their lives to expanding human knowledge and capabilities. Yet the choice before them challenged the fundamental question of what humanity should become. Counselor Zephyx, she addressed the Galactic Council representative. What is the Council's position on species that undergo fundamental biological transformation? The Council recognizes such species as new evolutionary branches, Zephyx replied carefully. They retain certain rights and privileges, but are classified differently than their originating species. The transformed beings would need to reapply for galactic citizenship as a new species entirely, meaning humans would cease to exist as a recognized galactic entity, Sarah concluded. Theoretically, yes, though the enhanced beings would likely qualify for immediate full council membership, given their expanded capabilities. Lieutenant Rodriguez had been unusually quiet during the discussions, but finally spoke up. Has anyone considered that maybe we don't have to choose between these options exclusively? Explain, Sarah prompted. The adapters didn't say we had to make a single choice for all of humanity. What if we establish different colonies that pursue different enhancement paths? Some worlds could develop biological adaptation while others focus on technological advancement. Dr. Foster leaned forward on the display. That could lead to humanity splitting into separate species entirely. Enhanced humans and baseline humans developing along completely different evolutionary paths, which might be exactly what we need, Webb suggested thoughtfully. Biological diversity has always been humanity's strength. Maybe technological and biological diversity should be our next development step. Engineer Patel pulled up holographic displays showing the technological specifications the adapters had provided. The technology option alone would transform human civilization. Unlimited energy, gravity manipulation, environmental control, we could build habitats anywhere in the galaxy. We wouldn't need to adapt to hostile environments because we could modify any environment to suit us. But that makes us dependent on technology, Vasquez pointed out. What happens if the technology fails? The enhanced humans would survive anything, while tech-dependent humans would be vulnerable to system failures. On the other hand, Rodriguez added, enhanced humans might evolve beyond recognizing their human origins entirely. Technology-enhanced humans would remain fundamentally human in biology and psychology. Sarah realized they were debating the future of human evolution itself. The choice wasn't just about surviving Zerion 7 or impressing the Galactic Council. It was about defining what humanity would become among the stars. Dr. Webb, in your opinion, what would each option mean for human psychology and culture? Webb considered carefully before responding. Biological enhancement would require adapting human consciousness to function in radically different physical forms. Our entire psychology is based on existing in relatively fixed biological forms. Enhanced humans might develop completely alien thought processes. And technological enhancement would preserve human psychology while expanding human capabilities. We'd remain recognizably human in thinking patterns while gaining access to tools that make environmental limitations irrelevant. Counselor Zephyx interrupted, with what appeared to be urgency. Captain Chen, I should inform you that the Council is receiving reports of similar first contact events on 3 other Deathworlds. These adapters appear to be making contact with multiple species simultaneously. What does that suggest? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. It suggests they're recruiting species for some larger purpose. The Council is concerned about beings with such advanced capabilities actively seeking contact with developing civilizations. Have you considered that maybe they're just trying to help? Dr. Foster suggested from Earth. Advanced civilizations offering enhancement to primitive species rarely do so without expecting something in return, Zephyx replied. The Council recommends extreme caution. Sarah made her decision. We're going back down to the surface. I want direct answers about the adapters' motivations before we make any choices about human evolution. Captain, Webb protested. If they have ulterior motives, confronting them directly could be dangerous. Dr. Webb, we're humans discussing the future of our species while sitting in orbit around a Class 0 Deathworld. Because we volunteered to prove we could build a research station where nothing should be able to survive. Dangerous is our natural environment. Rodriguez checked his equipment with grim satisfaction. At least this time we know what we're getting into, do we? Patel asked. Because I'm starting to think we've barely scratched the surface of what these beings are capable of. Sarah stood, ending the conference. Prep the shuttle. We're going to find out what the adapters really want, and then we're going to decide whether humans transcend our limitations through transformation, technology, or stubborn determination to survive impossible conditions without changing what we are. And if the adapters don't like our questions? Vasquez asked. Then we'll prove that humans can be just as adaptive as any enhanced species when properly motivated, Sarah replied. One way or another, we're completing this mission. The Galactic Council wanted to know human limitations. We're about to show them that human stubbornness doesn't have any. As the crew prepared for what might be humanity's most important diplomatic mission, Sarah couldn't help wondering if their choice would determine whether humans joined the galactic community as enhanced beings, technological masters, or stubborn primitives who refused sensible offers to improve themselves. All three options had their appeal. The second meeting with the adapters took place in a completely transformed environment. The landing zone had been expanded into what could only be described as a diplomatic complex, with structures that seemed to grow from the planet's surface in real time. More significantly, the environmental modifications now covered nearly a quarter of Zarian 7's surface. They've been busy, observed Dr. Webb, as their shuttle descended through atmospheric conditions that felt more like approaching a garden world than a Class 0 Deathworld captain. Chen watched the expanding zone of modified environment through the shuttle's viewports, or they've been demonstrating just how easily they can reshape entire worlds. The question is whether that's hospitality or a show of force. Multiple adapter entities were waiting for them at the landing complex, each having assumed different physical forms. Some appeared humanoid. Others resembled crystalline formations similar to Counselor Zephix's species, and several had taken forms that defied easy description. We greet you again, came the familiar environmental voice as the human team disembarked. We have prepared demonstrations to assist your decision-making process. Before we see demonstrations, Sarah said firmly, we need answers. Why are you making contact with multiple species simultaneously? What do you gain from offering enhancement to developing civilizations? The lead adapter, distinguishable mainly by its slightly more complex energy patterns, shifted into a form that more closely resembled human proportions. Direct questions. We appreciate efficiency. We offer enhancement because stagnation is the enemy of existence. The galaxy contains too many species that have achieved stability and ceased development. Meaning? Prompted Dr. Webb. Meaning the Galactic Council and its member species have created a civilization based on avoiding challenge rather than embracing it. They classify worlds as habitable or uninhabitable based on narrow environmental parameters. They develop technology to maintain comfortable conditions rather than expanding adaptation capabilities. Engineer Patel stepped forward, her scanners detecting energy patterns that grew more complex by the minute. You think galactic civilization has become too comfortable? We know it has, another adapter replied, this one taking a form that resembled flowing liquid metal. We have observed galactic development for millennia. Species achieve spaceflight, join the Council, accept standard environmental limitations, and cease meaningful development. Innovation stops. Evolution stops. Growth stops. So you're trying to restart galactic evolution? Rodriguez asked, maintaining his position near potential cover while keeping his weapons ready, but not threatening. We are trying to prevent galactic death through stagnation, the lead adapter confirmed. Comfortable species do not explore. They do not adapt. They do not discover new possibilities. They maintain stable populations on stable worlds with stable technologies until entropy claims them. Sarah began to understand the larger picture. You're looking for species that will continue pushing boundaries. That's why you're interested in humans. We actively seek out dangerous environments instead of avoiding them. Correct. Your species demonstrates rare characteristics. Most developing civilizations avoid environmental challenges. Humans appear to consider them recreational opportunities. Dr. Vasquez had been studying the environmental modifications around them. Zarian 7 isn't just a testing ground for adaptation. It's a screening process. You're using impossible conditions to identify species that don't accept the word impossible. Accurate assessment, the adapter confirmed. We modify worlds to create challenges that reveal species' capabilities and psychology. Most species that discover such worlds classify them as uninhabitable and avoid them. A few species attempt brief scientific surveys before withdrawing to safer environments. And then there are humans, Webb concluded, who show up with plans to build permanent research stations. Humans demonstrate the mindset necessary for continued development. You face challenges without adequate preparation, develop solutions using inadequate resources, and volunteer for assignments that sensible beings would decline. Rodriguez couldn't help but laugh. They're saying we're too crazy to stagnate. We are saying you possess psychological characteristics that resist stagnation, the adapter corrected with what might have been amusement. But your biological limitations restrict your development potential, which brings us back to your enhancement offers, Sarah noted. But now I understand the real question. You're not just offering to help us survive extreme environments. You're offering to recruit us for some kind of anti-stagnation campaign. We are offering partnership in preventing galactic civilization collapse through comfortable stagnation, the lead adapter confirmed. Enhanced species serve as development catalysts, ensuring continued growth and adaptation throughout galactic civilization. Patel's instruments were registering energy buildups that suggested massive changes were about to occur. Captain, I'm detecting significant modifications happening across the entire planet. They're doing something major. The adapters began changing form more rapidly, and the environmental modifications around them accelerated. Within minutes, Zarian 7's surface was being reshaped on a massive scale. We will demonstrate the choice you face, announced the lead adapter. Observe. The demonstration was breathtaking and terrifying in equal measure. In one section of the planet, they created a civilization of enhanced beings who could survive in any environment, reshape matter at will, and travel between stellar systems without technology. In another section, they established technological installations that could terraform worlds instantly, generate unlimited energy, and create habitats anywhere in the galaxy. Both paths lead to transcending environmental limitations, the adapter explained. Both paths prevent stagnation through continued challenge and growth. The choice between biological and technological enhancement determines method, not outcome. What about a third option? Sarah asked suddenly. Third option? What if we choose neither enhancement path, but prove that unenhanced humans can establish permanent presence on Class 0 Deathworlds through determination and ingenuity alone? The adapters paused their demonstrations. For the first time since contact began, they seemed genuinely surprised. You would choose to maintain biological limitations while facing unlimited environmental challenges? We're already doing exactly that, Rodriguez pointed out. We came here to build a research station on a world that supposedly can't support life. We made contact with your civilization using inadequate technology and insufficient preparation. We're having this conversation while standing on a planet that was trying to kill us 3 days ago. Fascinating, the lead adapter responded. You propose to transcend limitations without accepting enhancement, to achieve impossible results through insufficient means. It's what humans do, Webb added. We survive impossible conditions, explore dangerous environments, and accomplish unreasonable objectives using whatever tools we can build or borrow. Sarah made the decision that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy. We choose option 3. We'll establish our research station on Zarian 7 using human technology and determination. We'll prove that some species don't need enhancement. To transcend limitations, they just need sufficient motivation and creative stubbornness. This approach has never been attempted, the adapter noted, which is exactly why we're going to attempt it, Sarah replied. Someone has to demonstrate that impossible is just another word for hasn't been done yet. And if you fail, then we'll fail while trying something no one else has ever attempted. That's still a form of development. The adapters conferred among themselves through rapid energy exchanges that human instruments could barely detect. Finally, the lead entity responded. Your proposal is unprecedented. We will observe this experiment with great interest. Should you succeed in establishing permanent presence without enhancement, Humanity will have created a new development paradigm. What does that mean for the Galactic Council evaluation? Webb asked. If successful, your species will have redefined what constitutes survival in extreme environments. The classification system that categorizes Xerion 7 as Class 0 Deathworld will require revision. Sarah smiled. You mean we'll have broken their classification system entirely? Correct. Successful permanent habitation by unenhanced beings would necessitate creating a new classification. Class -1, worlds that are theoretically impossible to inhabit but are inhabited anyway through determination rather than capability. As the human team prepared to begin construction of their permanent research station, Sarah realized they weren't just completing their original mission, they were about to prove that human stubbornness, properly applied, could redefine the concept of impossible. The Galactic Council had sent them to test human limitations. Instead, they were about to demonstrate that properly motivated humans don't acknowledge limitations at all. 6 months later, Research Station Defiance became the first permanent settlement on a Class -1 world, staffed by humans who had decided that if the universe wanted to kill them, it would have to try harder.